That day, as Stephen walked home, he was stopped by a man named Irvin Edward Murphy. They were only a few blocks away from Stephen's house. And when Irvin asked him if his mother wanted to donate some items to the church, and Stephen said that yes, she probably would, this triggered something in Irvin. He offered him a ride home. He said, "Hey, Stephen, I'll talk to your mother when I drop you off." Irvin then introduced him to someone he called Reverend Parnell, who was waiting nearby in a white Buick. He said, "Come on, I'll drop you home." Irvin and Parnell told Stephen to get into the Buick, and trusting his two new friends, he did. After all, he was, helpful little Stephen. He just wanted to help. So the trio drove through the neighborhood, but when they got to Stephen's street, Parnell drove past it, telling Stephen that he'd call the boys' parents and ask if he could stay the night. Instead, Parnell drove Stephen to his cabin in Kathy's Valley. That night, again, by the way, remember, Stephen is 7. That night at the cabin, Parnell molested Stephen, 7-year-old Stephen, for the first time. The next day, he told Stephen that he would call his parents to ask if he could stay another night. But the days continued to pass, and eventually Parnell left Stephen in the cabin and then would come back after a few hours. To make the story more believable, Parnell also told Stephen that his parents no longer wanted him and that they couldn't afford to provide for so many children. Remember, they had 5 children. Stephen, who had heard his parents before this all happened, talking about financial troubles, this poor kid believed his captor. And days passed, and on the 13th day of Stephen's captivity, on December 17th, Kenneth Parnell, he began to rape him. Back in Merced, the Stayner family was posting as many missing person files as they could. They were calling schools, radio stations, and just about anybody who could get the word out. They were distraught, and no one had any information. Stephen had vanished into thin air. I can't even imagine what the parents were going through at this time. At the cabin a week after his abduction, Stephen began to refer to Parnell as Dad. Parnell had also given this poor little boy a new name, Dennis. Dennis Gregory Parnell. Parnell finally had what he wanted. He wanted a little boy to mold, to control, and to abuse. At first, he was strict with Stephen, but then as the boy seemed to conform to his wishes, he started letting a little bit loose. He trusted Stephen. And once Stephen even got outside unsupervised, he made it onto the road, but had no idea where he was or how to get help. After all, he was, again, reiterating, 7 years old. So he turns around, he goes back to the cabin. He tried to get help, but in a cruel twist of fate, he was being held only a few hundred feet from his actual grandfather's home. He was in reach of help the whole time, but he just never knew it.